It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to Montana's only statewide sports talk show. Broadcast on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Western Montana and across the state on SWX Television.
I like football!
Now, the 2017 Radio Sports Broadcaster of the Year on the show with back-to-back Montana Broadcaster Association awards for sports coverage and award-winning sports journalism. Here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Very happy about this. Montana by Lithia Ford. And so we jump right into it. Colter, how are you, man? You good? You feeling it over there? You all right?
Feeling it, dude.
Okay.
Doing all right.
Yeah.
Recovering from my procedure.
Yeah.
We're doing all right, though.
That's right, Colter. This is your first show back since having had to get in for some oral surgery to start getting your tooth going. I know that thing has been, trying to work through that. Got to take some antibiotics, make sure you don't.
Right.
The only thing worse than oral surgery is a second oral surgery.
Indeed.
So
especially one that comes with a bone graft. Ouch.
No kidding. So anyway, we'll make sure we try and keep it on the low. But
I'm doing well, though. I've been having interesting thoughts, though. Just about the evolution of life and the way
why we're able to walk on 2 feet now.
Well, but also just like the way you feel about certain things at certain times. And one thing in my life I really tried to do in recent months and years is, as our good buddy Colt Anderson from Up Top Clothing would say, enjoy the moment.
Yes.
And I used to be chomping at the bit, ready for football, and now. Like, this is the kickoff to football. Obviously, it's the Big Sky kickoff. Now football season officially upon us. 2 weeks away from the opening of fall camp. And that's cool. It is exciting. but I also want to savor the last couple weeks here. As you get older, you appreciate how fast this stuff goes even more. And it's just interesting. I used to just be, I'd already have written 10 football stories by this time of year, and by the time I got to this thing, I'm ready to roll. And now I'm just trying to, immerse myself into it. But it's an interesting league because the league has evolved so much, and it's actually come back around full circle, I think. And we're going to get into that. And I think it makes the league equal parts intriguing and maybe not as mysterious as it has been in the past, because I think that the powers that were and the powers that be are back on top, and there's a little bit more direct and tangible and defined stratification in the league now.
Well, let's go through this for everybody here. We're going to start off with the polls, the preseason polls. The coaches poll and the media poll has first of all, we all knew, right, who the top 5 teams were going to be. Right. And there's a clear kind of stratification there, although the voting was relatively close for a couple other teams. Northern Arizona finished in 6th, Idaho State 7th, and so they were not so. It wasn't like a precipitous drop off from a voting standpoint, but the media poll in terms of the top 5 is the same as the coaches poll 1 through 3. Eastern Washington, UC Davis, Weber State in that order. Eastern Washington obviously defending national championship appearance, defending national champion runner-up, and they graduated a bunch of guys at Eastern, but they got they had a huge junior class as well, so they still have like 22 seniors on that team, so a very veteran group, even though there was, a tremendous amount of turnover. And particularly, it's so interesting because if Gage Gubrud had played the whole year, and say they did exactly what they did with Eric Barrier, but no one knew who Eric Barrier was right. or what he was like, I think there'd be huge question marks and people would not be so ready. But now you're like, well, they're set at quarterback, seems like, for the next couple of years, so, pencil them in. And again, a lot of the preseason stuff seems like it's based in history rather than in the future. What did you do, before? And you made the note right here, Colter. I mean, a lot of this reflects, essentially where these teams finished last season. For Montana State, they both finished 4-5. In the media poll, Montana State was 4 with Montana 5. In the coaches poll, Montana was 4 with Montana State 5. So those are the order, and whether it matters or not, but the 2 Montana schools 4 and 5. I wasn't sure exactly how that was going to go. I think being here has influenced to me a little bit of what I think about this. I know we're going to get into this more, like who's real and who isn't real. But to get back to your point about the taking away maybe some of the mystery when you have that stratification, that's true to an extent. I think it'd be a real bummer if it was 2 or 3 teams. The fact that I think it's 5 teams makes it really intriguing to me, because really at the end of the day, who do we care when teams are finishing 6th, 7th, and 8th? I mean, when it's been Montana or Montana State, people who follow those teams, of course, care. But in terms of the Big Sky Conference, what are we interested in? Who are going to be the contenders for the conference championship, and who's going to be the contenders for the playoffs? And it feels like that is a very open question, and it's going to be a lot of fun watching the intersection. And for as bad as you and me and everybody else thinks the unbalanced schedule is, it does do this. It adds a dimension of mystery where you're not going to know certain things. So when teams play each other, we will make inferences based on performance. We're not even just wins and losses, but how the game went, because, okay, well, Team A isn't going to play Team B, but they played Team C, and then C and B will play each other, and how is that going to go? And so that adds sort of an element of it all, and that is, especially in these top 5 teams, we were looking earlier today, well, who's playing who in the top 5? Which teams, got to go? So that is, an aspect of this that we will get through as we go. But when you looked at this preseason poll, 1 through 5, exactly what we expected, did anything surprise you about the order?
Well, I think the order is a little bit inconsequential, but I'm not surprised that Eastern Washington was the consensus pick to win by both the coaches and the media, because of the fact they went to the national championship game a year ago. They do return one of the 2 best quarterbacks in the league in Eric Barrier. And, I mean, let's be frank about it. Eastern Washington is the premier program in the Big Sky Conference of this decade.
Has been.
I think there's no question. That since that 2010 national championship, they have been the Big Sky champions much more often than they have not. I mean, I think that they've won or shared at least 6 and maybe even 7 of the last of the 9 Big Sky championships this decade. So a tip of the hat to the respect that the rest of the league has for Eastern Washington. I also think that they have one of the more favorable schedules amongst the contenders. But when you look at those top three, those are the three teams that shared the Big Sky Conference championship a year ago. Mm-hmm. I think the difference here is that especially when it comes to the media poll, almost always the team with the best returning quarterback is the team that's voted as among, if not the preseason favorites. Now, Jake Mayer was the offensive player of the year in the league from UC Davis, their quarterback. And UC Davis came up second in both these polls. I thought that was a little interesting. I maybe expected Davis to be number one, considering they returned Mayer and a whole bunch of other good talent around him. But the thing I find most fascinating about the top three is that Weber State has made the playoffs 3 years in a row. They have won or shared each of the last two Big Sky Conference championships. They were in the top 5 all year last year. They will start the season in the top 10 this year. I think that no one that covers or analyzes or watches the Big Sky would have any argument saying that Jay Hill is one of the best coaches in the league, if not the best coach in the league. And they've really got it rolling in a lot of different elements. That said, they have not had a brand-name guy at quarterback. Jadrian Clark was pretty good. He was okay. He's pretty good. Stephen Cantwell, he was pretty good. But they haven't had a headline maker.
That's right.
And I think that's also – it's interesting, though, because Weber then has been – the conference champions each of the last 2 years without having the pressure of trying to fulfill those expectations. Case Cook has told us, from Northern Arizona, sixth-year senior quarterback, he said it's really hard being number one. When Cookus was coming off of his freshman year when he won the Jerry Rice Award, and NAU had all this stuff back, including Emmanuel Butler and Elijah Marks and all these great skill players plus Case Cookus, they were the consensus pick to win the Big Sky Conference. Well, they went 5-6 that year. Part of that was Cookus getting hurt, but having that bullseye on your back, it's like Jeff Choate said from Montana State. He said, when's the last time a team that was picked to win the league actually won the league? Oftentimes it doesn't work that way. It's based on your previous resume. But I think Weber State is in this interesting spot where they haven't ever taken a step back. When they do lose premier players, they just reload with other premier players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, especially on special teams. And they've never had the pressure of having to be number one. They've been able to be picked third and exceed expectations each of the last 3 years. So I find that factor interesting. Then when you talk about the Cats and the Grizz being fourth and fifth, respectively, and kind of being flipped there, well, Montana got a vote in the coaches' poll. Mm-hmm. And I think we could say, we could predict who we think gave that vote. We think it's Jeff Choate gave the vote for Montana. And so that's an interesting factor as well. The only reason that the Grizz finished ahead of the Cats in the preseason polls because of the one first-place vote they got from Jeff Choate or otherwise. That's an interesting deal, too. But I do think that that's about right, though, considering Montana State made the playoffs a year ago. They were fourth. Okay. And then the only thing that didn't mirror the postseason finish in this preseason, where did Idaho State, where were they picked in this?
Idaho State is 7th. So Northern Arizona is 6, Idaho State 7, Idaho 8, Cal Poly, Portland State, Sacramento State, Southern Utah, Northern Colorado.
Rod Fennessy made an interesting point to me. He said, "Hey, we went 6-5 last year, but we also played a down game and played an up game. So, their FCS record was 6-4, and they beat Montana State head to head. And when you looked at the actual final conference standings, there's 2 teams that finished behind the 3 teams that were tied in first. And that was Idaho State and Montana State. And if you look at the head to head." Idaho State, like Rob Fennessy said, we actually technically were alone in second last year when you look at the deal. And so he was saying, well, maybe we're a little bit underrated as a team that was alone in second that finished 7th. But then you factor in that they lose Tanner Guller and that, it's just Idaho State. They have a lot of obstacles to overcome, both culture-wise and just learning how to win. So they're maybe a team that was in the middle, that it didn't mirror the postseason finish.
Well, and I think your point is well taken. I think a lot of people said, okay, that was pretty good. Like, not pretty. I mean, Idaho State was the surprise of the conference last year. I think you can say, like, in terms of they were the team that was better than what people thought they were going to be. That said, I think there's a lot of people out there, myself included, that sit here and go, well, prove it. If Rob
you got to prove it when you don't have a 4-year
job.
starter.
That's right.
Too.
That's right. And that you're generating the program, and because they do have some disadvantages in Pocatello. When you talk about the facility that they got there and those sorts of things. So we'll see what Coach Fennessy is able to do. I think he's the right man for the job. Clearly there, and if anybody can do it, has the energy and the enthusiasm to do it. Certainly, Rob Fennessy does. But I also want to see Idaho State go out there and and get some good wins. You know what I mean? And show that they belong. Let's go back up though to the top of this thing, Colter, to the top 5. Eastern Washington. Here's the thing. They're the shoe-in team because they were in the national championship and they've been a great team. And I think they're really going to be good again. But I think that Weber State and UC Davis both. I would put them both ahead of Eastern. Montana. I think Montana should be 5th of the 5 because Montana is the biggest wild card of the 5.
Yep. And they have the toughest schedule.
That's right. And
because they have to play the other contenders.
Of those 5.
They have to play Eastern, Weber, and Davis, and Montana State. They play all 4 of the other top 5s.
Do they? They play Weber?
Yes, they play Weber in Missoula. And they play Eastern in Missoula, and they're at Davis, and they're at Montana State.
Okay. That is tough. No doubt. But if you're one of the contenders, then you need then you just got to deal with that and do that. But here's the thing. I think that Montana has the chance to be 5th. I mean, shoot, if you got to play all 4 and you're not as good as those teams, they could actually be worse because other teams aren't going to play as hard a schedule. They could be lower than 5th. But they could win the conference. I mean, they really could in terms of not just like worlds of possibility, but I'm talking about talent-wise, what they have and what they have rolling right now in Missoula. They are a potential. They have the lowest floor and the highest ceiling of any of these. Well, they all have equally high ceilings, I guess, as first place. But you understand what I'm saying. So as a wild card compared to what feels like more known commodities in the other 4 schools, I think that Montana 5th is fine. Montana State, I'm surprised. I guess I'm not surprised that they would be 4th. I thought they might be into 3rd at least in one of these because I think their talent everywhere but quarterback is pretty is almost unquestionable. Like they are really good. They're very good everywhere and they're elite in a couple places.
Yes.
Except for quarterback. And obviously that's a major question. And Jeff Choate talking to us today said, "Look, I'm as interested as everybody to find out what happens at quarterback." And so, that's obvious enough. But, if you could find me a team that's broadly, everywhere else, I don't know if there's another team that's as good across the board as Montana State is.
I absolutely agree, but it also just goes back to the point of how important a quarterback actually is. Weber State has been able to do it with some okay guys playing quarterback. They've been able to win at a high level the last couple of years. But you talk about these top 5. If all the games were played on paper, which they're not, but if you were to score this whole thing out, I think that the only other team in the league that could really, just based on their talent on paper, that could beat any of the top 5 teams is Northern Arizona, and that's if Case Cook comes out and has a stellar final year at the helm at quarterback. But when you look at this whole thing, if Montana State, Weber State, Eastern Washington, UC Davis take care of business against everybody else, the fact that they play each other but don't play each other, there's some on the schedule and some non on the schedule. Basically, they don't play each other enough times collectively as the 5 of them to eliminate each other if they take care of business against everybody else. And that's what I think is kind of the readjustment of the league is now you have 5 teams that I think if they all win the games they should, and then you call all the rest of the games against each other coin flips. You call every single one of them a coin flip. You're still going to be in the 8-9 win range fighting for that conference championship, and that's when all of a sudden you might be able to get 5 teams in the playoffs, which the Big Sky has never done. But I think these 5 teams have the talent as well as the national brand, the national recognition to do it. Now, when you really break this thing down, too, I mean, you just talked about Montana State. I think Montana State actually is the most solid of these 5 teams across the board. But when your glaring issue is at quarterback, that is an issue.
Yes.
Weber State has proven they can do it without an elite quarterback. I'm still waiting for Jay Hill to go get that guy, and maybe he will. Maybe he has him now. But maybe Jake Constantine is that guy if he gets back to being fully healthy. I know Jay Hill really likes Jake Constantine. Caden Jenks was really good, too, before he got hurt. I shouldn't say really good. He showed a lot of promise before he got hurt. We look at UC Davis, though. I mean, to me, UC Davis's biggest question mark is what's the next step? Can they take the next step? When you're riding the first time on the hype train and you beat an FBS team in San Jose State and you just continue to multiply this thing. It's just like when Portland State had that great breakthrough year. Well, how do you capitalize on that? Can you take the next step after that? And it's like we talked with Jay Hill too with Weber State. When you go from bottoming it out to rebuilding it to then barely getting into the playoffs to then winning a playoff game to then, okay, now here we are, a top 5 team chasing the conference title. You win it. Okay, now then what's the next step for you after that?
Yeah.
Eastern Washington, it's how do you replace 28 seniors? How do you readjust on year 2 under Aaron Best? You have the quarterback situation figured out. You have your offensive line figured out. Where do you spread it all around, both with the defense that was way better than people gave them credit for a year ago, as well as the skill guys, especially on the outside. You know they have guys waiting in the wings. But I think that it's very interesting because they all have such different but such striking question marks. And then you get down to the Grizz, and here's the thing that's different about the Grizz than the other 5 teams. I think there's a lot of what-ifs around UC Davis and Eastern Washington that have nothing to do with personnel. There's a giant what-if at Montana State that has everything to do with one position, and that's quarterback. There is sort of the same thought about Weber State, but then how do you carry the momentum into when you reach that threshold and it's into that 5th year under a coach, a 6th year, that's a challenge. But with the Grizz, I think that the question marks, they're not esoteric, they're not intangible. They are directly tangible. How do you address those? If you address them in the proper fashion, then all of a sudden maybe you're the team that takes the big leap.
Yeah.
I mean, think if Montana just finishes 2 of the 4 games that they blew last year.
Sure.
I mean, I would say that they straight up beat themselves against Western Illinois, Portland State, UC Davis, and Montana State. Got to give those other teams credit for coming in, rallying in Washington Grizzly Stadium, getting big wins down the stretch. North Dakota's another game where they turn the ball all over the place. Who knows what happens there? But let's say they just win even 2 of those games. Well, now you're an 8-win team and you're in the playoffs again. Yeah, and if you just take care of business like Bobby Hauck did the duration of his first tenure at Montana, well, now maybe you're talking about a 10-win team in year 1 under Coach Hauck. So I think that the fact that they have such tangible, defined issues that then they've had a year to work on, I agree. They could be the team that turns this whole thing on its head if they address the problems that they have directly and they remedy them in an efficient fashion.
Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television. We are doing the first. We'll be doing the rest of the year, the Montana Football Hour, the first hour of every show every Monday dedicated to football in the state of Montana, and certainly today, significantly the Big Sky in general, and where Montana State fit in, as we are live in Spokane, Washington, at Big Sky Conference Football Media Days. And Colter, you went through a few things here, and we're going to get into a little bit more. Who do you believe in? What teams do you believe in? We're going to get into some more specifics, and we will get into the all-conference teams. By the way, I can tell you that Dante Olson, the defensive MVP, preseason MVP player of the year for the Big Sky Conference, and Jake Mayer, the quarterback from UC Davis, the offensive MVP, preseason MVP of the league. So those are your top 2 award getters, but we'll go through the league. 5 Montana State Bobcats in total and 3 Grizzlies on the first team, or the preseason all-conference team here from Spokane. But you wanted to go through a couple of things here from just our experience of the day, of the weekend that we've had here in Spokane at the Conference Media Days, Colter. So tell me, what did you want to go through? Some highlights, some quotes, some whose shadow did you cower the most inside of, all those sorts of things?
As far as coaches' highlights, I mean, obviously Bruce Barnum, talking to him was pretty darn funny. He talked about some of their extensive and unique fundraising methods at Portland State. He called himself the chief fundraiser of the Portland State University Athletic Department, which I don't think is that far-fetched for being true, considering he's going to play a couple FBS games this year, and he's always out there working it. But he actually told me a funny story about how he loves those Dots pretzels, the ones from North Dakota. Have you had these? They've become
like
sort of regionally favorite.
Yeah, okay.
No, they're like pretzel sticks, but they have this pretty delicious seasoning on them.
Okay.
But he was saying that he's got the Dots guy on board. That's like the official sponsor of Portland State. So now he's got bags of Dots all over the place. I thought that was pretty funny. It was interesting Big Sky kickoff because the first one in decades without the grandfather and the godfather, Jerome Sowers from Northern Arizona. The first one in a long time. I mean, we've been without the big human Mike Kramer for a little while, but His spirit definitely resonates, and that's not necessarily the case now with him being out the league for a really long time. Not really any of his guys really in the league anymore either. So sort of a changing of the guard, but also a return of the guard with Bobby Hauck back in the fold. But I thought Jeff Choate this morning was entertaining, as he always is. I thought Bobby Hauck was entertaining too. I thought Coach Hauck was back to the matter in what he thinks of the league. He said, not any different than I thought it was going to be, except for I can't stand this unbalanced schedule.
Yeah.
We got to get this thing fixed. As far as the players go, really it was sort of a capsule in time interviewing Case Cookus. Because this is the fourth one he's been to of these.
Yes.
That's just an anomaly in itself.
Usually, when this event, you basically take not always your two very best players, but usually it's two leaders, like an offensive and a defensive captain, basically. So normally, if you come to this at all, once is what you get, and if you go twice, I mean that's something else. 4 times for Case Cookus. I asked him, I said, well, what's it like to be playing your 50th season of college football? And he was appreciative of that. It's nice to be a very veteran guy. But, yeah, it was interesting to talk to him. I thought from coaches – now, I'll keep the Montana State guys out of this because we always enjoy and have a great time talking with Coach Choate and Coach Hauck both, and they were great again today. I thought the guy that stood out to me, and specifically because I hadn't spoken with him before on an extended basis, was Dan Hawkins from UC Davis. He has an entirely different philosophy and perspective on football than basically what you're going to hear from every other coach. A lot of coaches differ wildly in personality, but I think there's a pretty narrow spectrum ultimately in sort of what they think about football and how to win games and even the meaningfulness or not of winning football games. It's not very often you're going to hear a coach go, we won a lot of games last year, and I just don't know if we're going to win that many again this year. Nothing's guaranteed. Like, really? Like, every coach in the world just goes, yeah, we're going to, great. Now we expect to, hit the next step on the deal. And so we'll, that's kind of how they go. But Dan Hawkins, in a very the way you might expect from a UC Davis guy, right? A bunch of geniuses running around Davis, California, but sitting in there and giving a perspective of like, we're going to emphasize the things that we care about, and it's not winning. It's about the process. It's about the things that we think are important. It's about the kids as holistic people who have, educations, emotions, lives to live, and football to play. And if we do all of these things well, then we'll see what the outcome is. Maybe we'll win some games. I thought that was so refreshing to me to hear from him. But you could certainly see the care that he has for all of the players as people, not merely as players and whatever. And all these coaches, of course, have relationships and care very much for these kids in their own ways. But this seemed, to me, sort of fundamental or foundational for him, and I thought that was really unique, very interesting. By the way, if you're wondering, we, of course, have overlapped a scheduled fire alarm check in the room that we're in, so they are strobe lighting the place, and you're hearing maybe some background noise. Pay it no attention, people. We've got you covered as we keep rolling here. But I thought Dan Hawkins was great to talk to, as was Jake Mayer. I mean, frankly, he sits down and when he breaks it down for you, you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. That's I can understand why Jake Mayer is able to run a pro-style offense and sit back there and sort of break it down. He's not a very striking guy, if I might say so, physically speaking. Like,
just 6 feet tall.
Yeah, pretty. He's strong for sure, but he's. You don't look at him and go, okay, well, obviously he's a great quarterback. Mm-hmm. But it's mental for him, and that comes across when he talks to you pretty readily, I thought, as well.
First time I ever interviewed Dan Hawkins, he told me, I ain't no top 40 guy, brother. I like to go listen to the guy down at the coffee shop who's playing his guitar all by himself. Marches to the beat of a different drum.
Yes.
I think that's been apparent throughout his career. When it's worked tremendously well like it did at Boise State. When it hasn't worked tremendously in a failing fashion like it did in Colorado. But I think that the fact that UC Davis is his alma mater and he's able to recruit the holistic vision like you're talking about. Davis had such a hard time playing Division I football for a long time because they never sacrificed what their academic fabric was. And I think that now you have a guy like Dan Hawkins who can recruit on that academic level. He can recruit, to steal a phrase from all the old Michigan guys, he can recruit UC Davis guys.
Right.
Michigan always talks about recruiting the Michigan man.
Yeah.
He can recruit Davis guys because he is a Davis guy.
Totally.
So he knows what that's like. For so long, they were recruiting Davis guys as students, but not as athletes, and that's why they were just very vanilla and very just kind of middle of the road in the league, outside the league, all the way around. So I love Hawkins as well. As far as the most striking, I mean, last year...
The first guy off the bus guy? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the first guy you bring off the bus.
Yeah.
Last year, the first thing we said when we got here, we're like, well, who are the two Weber guys? Legrand Toye and Isua Peta. Are those guys 30? Who are these guys?
Yes.
They're so put together. And then this year, Rashid Shaheed obviously has all the credentials in the world. I think he's definitively the best kick returner in America at the FCS level. You can't tell his speed by just looking at him.
Of course.
There's no doubt who the winner of the first off the bus competition though is Jonah Williams. The guy, he's been a physical specimen. I think he's been the most league-looking defensive end since the first time he ever put on a Weber State uniform several years ago. But now he's up to about 280 pounds. I mean, he's a real 6'5.5", maybe even 6'6", long arms, broad shoulders, 280 pounds. He looks the part as much as anybody that you will see in this league.
Got to sit down and have lunch with Jonah Williams, and I did go through the lunch line first, and that was not by accident. I mean, he's a big guy. The other guy who I thought was really big and shocking to me, Coulter, that Aaron Best would bring a lineman to this. You know what I mean? Stunner. But Dylan Ledbetter at Eastern Washington is no small guy in his own right. He's definitely a big dude, and he is a presence anyway, walking around with his with his camera, filming everybody, doing impromptu interviews, having a good time with it. But yes, Jonah Williams, he's the winner of the first guy off the bus to meet at this particular event this year.
Yep, that's what they look like. Also, it's a distinct, sort of a symbolic analysis to think that Eastern Washington has been quarterback U and wide receiver U for 20 years. And now they got an offensive lineman coaching the team, and Aaron Best, like you said, he brings his nose tackle and his tight end.
Yeah.
He doesn't bring his all-league quarterback. He doesn't bring any of his all-league running backs or any of the wide receivers.
Yeah.
Nope, we got the D tackle, and we got the tight end. I mean, Jace Gilder from Montana, so that was a cool experience for him, too. Actually, ironic that the only native Montanan at the conference this year was not a Bobcat, not a Grizzly, but an Eastern Washington Eagle and Jace Gilder.
Yep, very, very true. It is Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, and you are listening to the very first Montana Football Hour. We are live from Spokane, Washington, Big Sky Conference Media Days. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go back to the top of the rankings with Weber, Eastern, and UC Davis, the top three. Who do we believe in? Who do we not believe in of those three, and why? We will discuss next. The Montana Football Hour is brought to us by Lithia Ford of Missoula. Lithia Ford is this Thursday, July 18th. Lithia Ford's 2019 Ford Ranger Lunch Party. The Ford Ranger is back, and it's time to celebrate its long-awaited return. Join Lithia Ford for food, fun, and prizes this Thursday from 5 to 8 p.m. Visit lithiafordmissoula.com for more information, and visit the new showroom as well at Lithia Ford across from Walmart on Brooks in Missoula. The new Ford Ranger plus all the new and used vehicles as well. This Thursday, July 18th, the Lithia Ford 2019 Ford Ranger Lunch Party. Back right after this.
Hey, Tutel Nuanez here. Can't tell you how many times we've heard the face for radio joke since we came on SWX television, but it's been a fun endeavor so far.
And now our esteemed producer, Tommy, is pushing the envelope even further. We got our own YouTube channel.
That's right. If you want to watch us every day from your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, you can check out Tutel Nuanez on YouTube.
Tutel Nuanez, live every weekday from 4 to 6 in the afternoons on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula, SWX Montana statewide, and now around the planet Earth on YouTube. Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River. ever.
Alpine Touch makes the perfect gift this summer or any time of year. If you are traveling, bring a gift that is distinctly Montana and gift your loved ones some of the best spices anywhere around. From the Alpine Touch Pick 4 Spice Pack to the All-Purpose Twin Pack to the mouth-watering sunflower shoots to Alpine Touch gift cards. Alpine Touch makes the perfect Montana present. Available at retail locations around the state or online for a limited time. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up, pump it up.
There's lots of fun to be had this summer. Get your wings at Town Pump with Red Bull Energy 12 ounce, 3 for only $7. Be refreshed and delighted anytime with any size fountain drink for just $1. Town Pump is right down the road. What are you waiting for?
Town Pump, right down the road. Pump it up, oh yeah.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from Tutel Nuanez 1029 ESPN Missoula here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom got me a great deal on an automatic car starter this winter. Now it's summer. What sort of stuff you guys got going on down there, Tom?
Well, Colter, coming into the summertime, we're picking up on the window tinting front. So if you need your windows tinted, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled up. Boats and ATVs are starting to come in full swing, and we're also starting to see the hot rods come out to play. Anything audio related, let us know. We'll get you taken care of.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
It happens. You're positive you put your bank card back in your wallet, but the next time you need it, it's missing. Avoid the panic and take control with the MyCard app and debit card from Farmer State Bank. Our app lets you control your debit card and securely turn it off right from your phone. Safe, secure, instant. MyCard is available only at Farmer State Bank. Ask about it at any of our 9 locations or learn more at farmersebank.com. Farmer State Bank, member FDIC.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez, ESPN Sports Center. The preseason polls reflected the final regular season standings when the Big Sky Conference released its preseason projections Monday. At the Big Sky Conference kickoff in Spokane, Eastern Washington was selected by the league's coaches and affiliated media to represent as league champions, or to repeat, as league champions. UC Davis, an upstart who shared the league title with the Eagles and made the first FCS playoff appearance in the program history in 2018, was picked to finish second in both polls.
Weber State was picked to finish third in both polls, while Montana came in fourth in the coaches poll and fifth in the media poll. Montana State picked fourth by the media and fifth by the coaches. Weber State shared the league title and made a third straight playoff appearance last season, while Montana State earned its first playoff berth since 2014 last fall. UC
Davis quarterback Jake Mayer was selected as the Big Sky preseason Offensive Player of the Year. The senior was the league's Offensive Player of the Year last fall. He threw for 3,941 yards and 34 touchdowns. Montana's Dante Olson was selected as the league's preseason Defensive Player of the Year. Last season, Olson was a consensus All-American after piling up a school record 151 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles.
Other cats on the preseason team: Troy Anderson, Mitch Brott, Bryce Stirk, Braden Conkle, and Munchie Filer. Other Grizzlies on the team: Sammy Akim and Jace Lewis.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound. Find Tutel and Nuanez on the World Wide Web at 1029ESPN.com, Facebook/ESPN Missoula. And for the best Big Sky coverage in the state of Montana, go to SkylineSportsMT.com. Now from the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Who do you believe in the Big Sky at the top of the polls? Why? Or why not? It's Tutel Nuanez, 109 ESPN Radio, broadcasting through the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris is celebrating their 30th anniversary. That's right, 30 years they've been in business, and they are doing it by passing the savings on to you with 30% off. That's right, up to 30% off MSRP on select parts and accessories with the purchase of any new Polaris off-road vehicle, Husqvarna or Beta dirt bike, or any Crest pontoon boat. See Kurtz for details. Some restrictions apply. Kurtz Polaris in Missoula and Seeley Lake, their 30th birthday all month long, the month of July. Go in, see their 30th anniversary sale at Kurtz Polaris. If you would like to listen to us and you're not near your radios, or perhaps it's more convenient, you can check us out on the web, 1029ESPN.com, and there you can listen to the stream. The stream is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and obviously this show in there for 2 hours every weekday afternoon. You could go check that out. 1029ESPN.com is brought to us by Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. It is the Montana Football Hour. We continue in the first hour of every show doing only football and football that is relevant and in the state of Montana. Brought to us by Lithia Ford of Missoula. Coulter. Preseason polls came out, as we said, again, Eastern Washington, UC Davis, Weber State 1 through 3, Montana State and Montana 4th or 5th, depending on whether they're in the media or the coaches poll, but basically 4-5 for the Montana schools in their picks here. You wanted to go through particularly the top 3. We have ideas, a lot of thoughts. We've said a lot, and we will continue to say a lot about Montana and Montana State. But now that we sit here and we got this Eastern, UC Davis, Weber State 1, 2, 3, you want to go through how much do you believe in them or why not? So set this up for us.
Well, I think these are the 3 other contenders out of Montana, and I think that they have some interesting returners, some interesting things to highlight, and some interesting storylines. And, I think that I believe in all 5 of these teams' abilities to make the playoffs, but I think that there's going to be more ebbs and flows than maybe. To me, as somebody, this is my 14th year covering this league. This seems like the most cut and dry stratification of the league, the most tiered it's ever been in terms of
top, middle, bottom.
You really couldn't talk me into a single other team besides these 5 teams making the playoffs, and you also couldn't talk me into any of these teams not making the playoffs. I really do think that if things go according to plan, barring injury or barring some unforeseen circumstances, that 4 of the 5 teams that we're analyzing right here, and maybe as many as 5, make the playoffs. I think that the X factor to get the 5th in is Montana. Besides that, if it's not the same 4 playoff teams from a year ago, and that's never how it works. It's never how it works. But it seems to me that that's more of a likely occurrence this year than ever before. That said, I don't think that, like I said, that's not how it always works. Yeah. I think that there's some defined question marks to talk about. With Eastern Washington, let's start there. I think that I've never seen a situation where you're trying to replace 28 seniors. You just never have 28 seniors. So how do you go about replacing them? I'm not sure. And you talk about all the great players the Eastern had. Not only JT Tooley, who's the defensive MVP a year ago. You got to replace Josh Lewis and Delando Tucker, probably the best pair of corners in the league. You have to replace a ton of your linebackers. You do return 4 out of 5 stars on the offensive line. That's a great place to start. You return Eric Berrier. That's another great place to start. But who's next at wide receiver? But that's been the question every time there's a new cycle, and whoever is next has always been just A-OK at Eastern Washington, if not amongst the all-time best in the history of the league. Who's next at running back after Sam McPherson? Well, you still have some talented guys like Antoine Custer and Tamarick Pierce. But I do think that just the dynamic of replacing 28 seniors, regardless of who they are and where they played, that's a unique thing. That's definitely something that Eastern's going to have to go through. And then I also think that we've talked a lot about the staff stability at Montana and how much of an advantage that is. The fact that they don't have any new position coaches. Everybody is back for year 2 under Coach Houck. Eastern Washington is going to be going through a whole bunch of new changes, namely the fact that Bodie Reeder, the offensive coordinator, he's no longer there. So that's going to be, when you count Zach Hill, Troy Taylor, Bodie Reeder, that's 3 OCs in the last 4 or 5 years at Eastern Washington. So now they have a 4th guy in the last 6 years. How does Eric Berrier adjust to that? I thought that Bodie Reeder had a phenomenal ability to use Eric Berrier last year, especially down the stretch once they figured out a lot of their run-pass option stuff. You're going to have a new defensive coordinator because Jeff Schmedding moved on. So are they able to pair the offense and the defense? There was a lot of continuity between Bodie Reeder and Jeff Schmedding, too, because when you play like Eastern plays on offense, the fact that they do run the ball more helps a lot, but you have to play a certain style defensively too, a certain mentality. How does that mesh? And then, when you're the new guy, the upstart guy, you have a fresh idea, you have all this stuff on your basically you were handed one of the great teams in school history at Eastern Washington, and you navigate it like Aaron Best did in year 1. You put your stamp on it like he did in year 1, running the ball with a lot more authority, play a lot more physical style of football. You lose, the preseason player of the year in Gage Gubert, and you don't miss a beat. You take over with Eric Berrier and you keep it rolling. All that sort of stuff is how do you build upon it? Nothing in life is easy. Nothing in sports is easy. But Aaron Best walked into a great situation with the amount of veterans that he had on the staff, the amount of staff continuity that he inherited, and the amount of veterans that he had on the team. Just the talent, just the pure talent level. Eastern Washington had a definitive advantage over everybody in the league last year. How do you parlay that momentum into year 2? How do you continue to make the program your own? And now when you have to start winning with more of your own guys and more of your own style, more of your own culture, how do you do that? That's going to be a huge question mark for me for Eastern Washington.
I understand why Eastern Washington is number one. I would have had them at number 4. I think Eastern Washington has. Here's what Eastern Washington has a great situation in. First of all, as you said, the great team that was there that they inherited. All those guys walk out the door, 28 guys, but they also have 22 guys that were juniors last year that are right in there. And one of the things that people don't pay enough attention to is depth on a football team.
Absolutely.
Because you are going to need it. And you know what that is? Recruiting. Okay? If you it's certainly coaching too, but you got to have guys who can just physically do it when they're needed that are there. And guess what? Nobody would have thought when Gage Gubrud went down that the Eastern Washington Eagles were going to be okay. Well, guess what? They weren't okay. They were great. And they went to the national championship game with Eric Berrier, who is now, certainly in the conversation as one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Sky Conference. And so that's phenomenal. And Aaron Best told us today, hey, he's like, I love that Eric Berrier is there. I had nothing to do with getting him here. I had nothing to do with it.
Totally.
And why would he? He's he's an offensive lineman and he's a positional coach before he becomes the head coach. So that's the reality of it. All I'm saying is this: it's going to take time before you find out how good a recruiter and program with Aaron Best at the head of it can Eastern Washington be, and it seems like Bo Baldwin was one of the best that there was. One of the best
coaches in the history of Big Sky.
If to ask a guy who's a first-time head coach to come in here and be also the best it's ever been is a tall task. Okay, and the expectations or the standards, as Aaron Best would say, are always going to be high. They're always going to be national championship caliber, and he's proven that he's got the ability. I mean, the fact that he went in there and did what he did with his stamp yesterday, I thought last year was absolutely to his credit. In every way, but I'm just not convinced yet that there isn't going to be some fall off talent-wise and otherwise, and especially at a program that has been quarterbacks and wide receivers forever. Now we're going to start playing, running the football and playing tough-nosed defense, which, by the way, I like that. I think that's, the way to go, especially in the Big Sky Conference in a lot of ways. But I think the transition, and as you talked about, the turnover on the staff is significant. And I think there's of these top 5 teams, I think there's I think that Eastern Washington has the most questions still to be answered, even coming off a national championship, than the other schools outside of Montana. So I would have them at 4. I would have had Montana State at 3. And
rebuttal for the Eastern would just be that none of the questions that they faced this year, with the exception of Aaron Best year 2, are new. Everybody wondered how they were going to replace this quarterback, and you can just go on down the line. How are you ever going to replace Vernon Adams?
Totally.
And then you have Gage Gubrud, right? So, I think that Eastern Washington has some distinct advantages in the Big Sky Conference because of their academic makeup, who they can get, where they're located, the fact that Washington as a state is under-recruited. I just think that you're never going to have to worry about the talent that you have at the skill positions at Eastern Washington.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, their offensive line is going to be so good.
And it always is. That's the most underrated part about their whole program.
And with Aaron Best there, you got to think that it's just going to they're just going to roll them out there. And so that's huge. Their starters, as like the team that they come up in with, there's no question that is a Big Sky Conference championship caliber team.
Yep.
But also, I think that there's a lot of times where, not a lot of times, it always doesn't go to quote unquote script. Okay, there's always stuff that happens, whether it's injuries. I mean, we haven't even touched on this, Coulter, but over the weekend, terrible news for Eastern Washington as 2 of their players were shot in downtown Spokane, non-life-threatening injuries, but we don't know their status right now, and that's obviously a whole story unto itself. By the way, this was disassociated from the event. This wasn't 2 players that were coming to the Big Sky Conference event for what it's worth, but
two good players too, though.
2 really good players.
DeHonta Hayes and Keith Moore both expected to start.
And my point is that you never know what's going to transpire, whether it's on the field, off the field during the course of the year, and you're always going to need to call on the next man up. Well, who's the next man up now? And even though they've always been able to get talent, from some inherent advantages that the institution has. You still have to have the guy in place to do that. And I have no reason to think Aaron Best can't or isn't doing that, but I also don't know that he can. Until you've done it, you haven't done it. And especially with 4 new guys on the staff who are often the recruiting guys anyways, I think that it takes adjustment, and I'll be interested to see how that all plays out. Anyway, for what it's worth, I would have had Weber State 2 and UC Davis 1. That's my rankings from the third official rankings of the Big Sky Conference, the two-tell rankings. Go UC Davis, Weber, MSU, Eastern Montana, 1 through 5.
Weber State, best pair of defensive ends in the league when you talk about Jonah Williams and Adam Rodriguez. Both those guys were first-team All-League guys a year ago. How does their production, how is it affected by the fact that they lose everybody in their secondary? They had the best secondary in the league last year. They had the best pair of safeties in the league by far a year ago, and that can buy you so much time. I mean, Weber was nasty on defense. I mean, like Jeff Choate said when they were scouting for Weber, there's about half a dozen dudes on this defense that nobody else in the league's got.
Yeah.
And so how do they replace some of their interior defensive linemen? I mean, Felipe Sataki was really a great player last year for them too. So can those DNs produce when they don't have the big block eaters on the middle? And when they don't have Landon Stice and LeGrand Toye running sideline to sideline, those two guys were 2 of the better inside linebackers in the entire conference as well, plus the best secondary in the league. I mean, Weber was stacked on defense. They still have some pieces, but where are we at with some of these younger guys? Well, but Jay Hill's proven he can recruit on that side of the ball.
That's my point, is that the thing that is in place is Jay Hill. And
Yes.
he is proven. And so in 4 years, we may be saying the exact same thing about Aaron Best. But right now, you go, well, yeah, they lost a bunch of guys, but they had guys to lose. Why? Because Jay Hill's the one who got those guys in the door and guaranteed, the next order is up in Weber State.
And Jay Hill made an interesting comment to us, too. He said that the number one key for us to continue to do this is to continue to get the best players in the league. And I think it's so easy for us as media and as people that analyze this to gravitate towards the guys that make a lot of the headlines when we're talking about the best players in the league. When you're talking about the Troy Andersons of the world and you're talking about the Dalton Sneeds and Dante Olsons of the world. These guys are the guys that are the headline makers. They're on the front page of the paper. What Jay Hill understands, though, is that there's 22 positions on the football field plus specialists. And you can stack a bunch of the best players in the league that maybe aren't the headline makers. They have the best kicker in the league in Trey Tuttle. They have one of the 3 best punters in the league. They have the best kick returner maybe in the country in Rashid Shaheed. They have 2 of the best defensive ends in the league. They will be one of the best offensive lines in the league. So they're stacking guys at non-headline making positions, which I think sometimes makes them a little bit underrated. But when we talk about the culture that they've established, it's like Bruce Barnum said. He said, I got so much respect for Jay Hill because he never believes anybody when they tell him that 7-3 is boring. like Barney said, like Jay Hill is down to beat you 17-14. He is down. He does not care. 114 yards of total offense, I don't care if we win. And I think it's a distinct, unique identity in this league.
Well, and that is to me the thing that I take when I'm ranking these teams and doing this, kind of on my own. The thing that is the most influential thing to me is the head coach spot. And this has nothing to do with, well, what are you saying, that Jay Hill is a better coach than Bobby Hauck or whatever? I'm not comparing them in that way. What I am saying is that Jay Hill has a thing rolling, and it's and if you're the guy in the program who's making that program year in and year out what it is and has become nationally elite, which it has in Ogden, that is very different from coming in, taking over, changing a system, which Bobby Hauck has had to do. And even though he has a hugely proven track record at the University of Montana, of course, again, just like Aaron Best, year 2 is very different from year 4, is different from year 6. And so, talk to me in 2023, 2024, and let's see where we're at with this. And that, we'll see who's at the top. But right now, it takes a little bit of time, and there's still question marks and uncertainty for various reasons at some of these other places. I don't see that, and I think that the talent level and the way, and like you said, Dan Hawkins at his alma mater, he's in his 3rd year as head coach, which again is not that many, but he's in his 6th year there in the program, and also has already gotten it to that level, and so it continues to go with him with all the people he's returning, including the offensive MVP. So the Aggies will not jump out to fans in the state of Montana as I'm sure Montana fans have it chalked up as a W week 1 of the Big Sky Conference season when they were down at UC Davis. Does UC Davis play Montana State?
They do. Week before
second to last
Grizz.
week of the season. I would bet that Montana State fans have that chalked up as a W as well. It's UC Davis. Well, guess what? This UC Davis team, the real deal. And it's not just the players; it's the whole culture and atmosphere about it, and I believe in them. Now, does that mean that they're going to win the conference? No, it does not. But in my preseason poll, before any games have happened, I like where they're at now. Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It is our Montana Football Hour. It's brought to us by Lithia Ford of Missoula. We got into the teams. Let's get into some individual players, okay? Dante Olson, Defensive Player of the Year preseason from the Montana Grizzlies. He's joined by 2 other teammates, and the Montana State Bobcats, they got 5 guys on the all-conference team. We'll go through it next.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce 2 of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get up to $150 instant rebate on 4 backcountry MT or AT tires, or $50 on 4 road control passenger tires. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters. And you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Hey everybody, Ryan Tutel, and I'm here with Josh of the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, there's a lot of lawyers in this area. What makes you different?
At the Advocates, we primarily focus on injury cases. That gives us the experience and the knowledge to correctly evaluate your case and work with insurance companies and other attorneys so you get exactly what you deserve to make you whole again. We take really good care of our clients, and we're going to fight for every single dollar you deserve.
Call 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate.
Still emerging from your winter hibernation and need to get your bearings straight? Cruise on down to Board of Missoula for all your spring and summer needs. Come check out their men's and women's streetwear, sunglasses, and shoes from brands like Vans, Adidas, Thrasher, Volcom, and the original Board of Missoula brand. They also have all your skating needs covered, from tune-ups to fresh-made custom boards. Board of Missoula, Missoula's original board shop since 1989, on the Hip Strip, 618 South Higgins.
Most of my family, they never graduated high school, so I'm trying to break that barrier.
My daughter, Brooklyn, was also a motivation for me to go back to school.
Every day after work, went straight to school, and it paid off.
At age 26, Kareem finished his high school diploma.
I could not have done it alone.
I see the future is really bright for me.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Welcome back. Tutel Nuanez, Montana Football Hour. We're broadcasting through the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, and now celebrating their 30th anniversary. 30 years they've been in business, and they are passing the savings off to you by giving you 30% off. That's right, 30% off MSRP on select parts and accessories with the purchase of any new Polaris off-road vehicle, Beta or Husqvarna dirt bike, or any Crest pontoon boat. See dealer for details. Some restrictions apply. Kurtz Polaris, all July, their 30th anniversary sale. Get in there and check it out. We continue in the Montana Football Hour. and we're going to spill into the second hour. That's okay. It's presented by Lithia Ford. And Colter, we just quickly want to mention the guys who are the first-team All-Americans, or the preseason team, I guess. It's only one team, but I said All-American, not All-American, excuse me, All-Conference guys, both from Montana and Montana State. Dante Olson, the player of the year on the defensive side of the ball, the preseason defensive MVP from Montana, just as obvious as it could be after his record-setting and Buck Buchanan finalist year last year. He's joined by Samuel Akem as the wide receiver from the University of Montana, and also Jace Lewis, maybe a surprise to feel, as a defensive special teams MVP. So an outstanding year last year. No surprise that the two coaches who probably emphasize special teams the most, in Bobby Houck and Jay Hill, have the two special teams guys as the representatives for their preseason poll. Obviously, as we mentioned, Rashid Shaheed from Weber State. For Montana State, 5 guys on the team. Offensively, Mitch Brott on the offensive line as a tackle, and Troy Anderson as a fullback, but let's just disregard the position. It's just Troy Anderson doing what he's doing, and so he is a certainly deserving preseason all-conference guy, of course. On the defensive side, 3 guys from Montana State. Bryce Stirk as an outside linebacker, Braden Conkle as a senior safety, and then who's the other guy that I'm missing? Craig Filer.
Munchie.
Craig Munchie-Filer at a cornerback spot, so all 3 levels. Well, two back guys and 1 middle guy, but they're going to be a solid defense for sure. But 8 in total from the state of Montana on the preseason all-conference teams.
Better representation than the last couple of years, which I think is necessary and indicative of the progress that the two programs are making. I think that Montana State deserved all the guys that they got on there. I think Montana did as well, and I think that we look at the premier players in the league that are in the 2 Montana schools. Yeah, Dalton Sneed's the only guy that was kind of on the outside looking in on this thing, but that's just because there's only 1 quarterback selected. And Dalton Sneed was the newcomer of the year in the Big Sky a year ago. But other than that, I don't really think there was any Montana guys necessarily that were snubbed, except for maybe Jerry Lou McGee. You could probably make an argument for him in terms of receiver. Jared Harrell from UC Davis was the one guy who I didn't really consider as a wide receiver, but you have to expect him to have a huge jump in numbers with Keelan Doss being gone and him moving to be the number 1 guy there. But the only other Bobcat or Grizzly that I thought maybe deserved to be on the team that was not was Jared Padmas from Boulder, Montana. He's a punter, and Padmas is a rugby-style punter. He hasn't allowed a punt return of consequence in years.
Yeah.
So his net punting might not be up around 48 yards because he's not booming it. He doesn't kick indoors like Cade Coffey from Idaho. But his net punting has led the country the last 2 years. What else do you want out of your punter? Yeah. And the kid has been absolutely lights out in his consistency. So I think that is maybe one of the oversights. But other than that, I thought that the fact that there was a smattering of Montana and Montana State names on the list is a good sign just for the health of the programs, because we've been a Montana defensive player is always going to be a guy Montana's best defensive player is always going to be a leading candidate for Montana for defensive MVP. And we saw Josh Buss get it last year. We saw Caleb Kidder get it a couple years ago. But the fact that there was multiple guys on both sides of the ball for both the Cats and the Grizz, well earned, and I think indicative of the progress that they're making as programs.
Sutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. The first Montana football hour of the year is in the books, but don't worry. We're just going to continue talking Montana State football, because we've talked broadly about the conference, some about the teams, obviously the Cats and the Grizz in the top 5. We're going to dial in to Montana and Montana State, though. Specifically, what do we expect from them next? The Montana Football Hour brought to us by Lithia Ford.
Now from the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes, too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
You're a big league fan. You expect big league service. At the Desperado, you get exactly that. With 35 flat screens, ice-cold brews on tap, and Missoula's #1 wings, you're free to sit back and enjoy every pitch. This summer, make the Desperado your baseball home away from home. Cool off after work, relax on the weekends, soak in some great food and drinks, and watch your team make yet another great push for October. And hey, if yours can't do it, there's plenty of other teams and fun to go around at the Desperado Sports Tavern on South Russell across from the Y.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
Stop into Town Pump this summer for all your cold beverages. Enjoy your cold one at the lake or on the porch. Pick up Miller and Coors 12-pack cans, 2 for $20. Enjoy summer for longer with Mix and Match 5-hour energy shots, 2 for $5 at your Town Pump.
Right down the road, pump it up, yeah.
Jayco and Rangich Brothers are teaming up once again. We take pride in being Western Montana's #1 Jayco dealer and strive to continually offer you the best quality, pricing, and reliability. To celebrate the arrival of summer, we are offering July Hot Buys. From RVs to parts and service, we've got you covered. Save big on Jayco J-Flight SLX 264 Bunkhouse Travel Trailer. Sleep 7 starting at only $14,995 with payments as low as $149 per month OAC. Don't miss our July Hot Buys going on now. Only where a handshake means something. Rangich Brothers RV Center.
Hi, boys and girls. Ryan Tutel
and Colter Nuanez
from Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio, from your very favorite Tutel and Nuanez podcast, and now officially Gracious Mercy on television statewide.
That's right. We've been doing a radio show and a podcast since August of 2017, and now it's time for us to expand our reach into statewide television on SWX.
We're on SWX every weekday from 4 to 6 live on your televisions. It's available on channel 199 on Spectrum Cable or on 23.3 on your antenna television. And you can download the Watch SWX app and get us that way on your phones and devices as well.
And of course, we'll still be right here, 102.9 ESPN Radio from Missoula and the Bitterroot Valley. And as always, you can find the podcast, the live stream, and everything else you need, 1029ESPN.com.
Colter, do you think that we're spreading ourselves too thin? Are we going to saturate these people and they're just going to start hating us, the inevitable backlash of the great heights to which we have now attained?
No chance. Tutel Nuanez, Montana's only statewide sports talk show.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Colter Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. The preseason polls reflected the final radio season standings with the Big Sky.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colter Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. We couldn't quite get the microphone sorted out. We'll get it sorted out. I think it's your connection, bud. We'll get there. Hey, the first preseason poll. In fact, the only preseason poll, because it's the preseason. It was just released today. The Big Sky Conference releasing its preseason polls at the Big Sky Kickoff in Spokane. Eastern Washington was selected by the league coaches and affiliated members to repeat as league champions. UC Davis, an upstart who shared the league title with the Eagles, made their first FCS playoff appearance in program history in 2018. They were picked to finish second in both polls as well. Weber State was picked third in both polls, while Montana came in fourth in the coaches poll and fifth in the media poll. Montana State was picked fourth by the media and fifth by the coaches. Weber State shared the league title and made a third straight playoff appearance last season, while Montana State earned its first playoff berth since 2014 last fall. UC Davis quarterback Jake Mayer was selected as the Big Sky preseason Offensive Player of the Year. The senior was the league's Offensive Player of the Year last fall. He threw for over 3,900 yards and 34 touchdowns. Montana's Dante Olson was selected as the league's preseason Defensive Player of the Year.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound. Tutel and Nuanez, live on the stream at 1029ESPN.com. The stream is available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Now from the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Hi, how are you? Great to be with you, Tutel and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, heading into hour number 2 of the big show. We are not in studio. If you're watching us on SWX Montana TV, you can see that, and you're welcome. Give your eyes a rest for the day. We are in Spokane, Washington, at the Big Sky Conference Football Media Days, the kickoff to the 2019 college football season for the Big Sky Conference. It's been fun to be here and enjoy it. Glad to be along with you. We are broadcasting live through the Kurtz Polaris studios still. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com, and celebrating their 30th anniversary. That's right, 30 years they've been in business. So what are they doing? Well, they're giving out presents to you. That's 30% off. That's right, 30% off. MSRP on select parts and accessories with the purchase of any new Polaris off-road vehicle, Husqvarna or Beta dirt bike, or any Crest pontoon boat. See dealer for details. Some restrictions apply. Kurtz Polaris, Missoula and Sealy, celebrating their 30th year anniversary. Get in and check them out. You want to call? 329-1899, the phone number. You're certainly welcome to do that. All guests join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. Coulter, we've gone through the Big Sky Conference, what we think specifically about the 5 teams at the top of the preseason poll, which are exactly who we thought that they would be. But we know that there's a couple of teams in here that are 4th and 5th, and I'm interested to know. I don't have a very good feel for what folks in Bozeman, folks in Missoula think about Montana and Montana State being 4th and 5th in the polls. If they're shocked that it's that low, if they think it's about right, if they're like, well, yeah, I don't think that many fans would be like, well, that's way too high. They shouldn't be that high at all. But I think that there's a lot of people go, there's no way UC Davis is better than Montana or Montana State. Weber, really? Are they going to be any good? They couldn't even throw the football. I don't know what they're thinking about that. I think you and I both think that 4 and 5 is pretty close to accurate for these two teams in certain terms of the preseason situation where they are right now. But what do we think? Again, where you're ranked in the preseason poll is, first of all, meaningless we've talked about how it impacts polling later on, potentially, where you have to rise from. But the point is that, they're going to go play some football, and we'll find out what's what, okay? I get all of that. But also, to me, the preseason poll is not a reflection of expectation. It's not a reflection of, do I think that Montana is going to finish 5th in the Big Sky Conference in my heart of hearts? No, I don't. Do I think Montana State's going to finish 4th? Probably I don't. But I think that the rankings are pretty apt as far as it goes. But when you look at these teams and where you think they can do or will do, what comes to mind?
Well, one thing that I always talk about is just the fact that the easiest thing for a layman's fan to understand, no matter what sport you're talking about, especially team sports, is offense. And so the team that's going to score the most points, the team that has the most dynamic playmakers, it's often easy to understand why those teams would be ranked high, why those teams would be expected to win.
Yeah.
Weber State is 36-26 in 5 seasons under Jay Hill. That's including a 2-10 year, his first year. They made the playoffs 3 years in a row for the first time in program history. I cannot remember Weber State beating anybody 52-10 during any of those 36 wins.
Right.
They've won back-to-back 10-win seasons, back-to-back years, and they whip you in a completely different way. When they hold Eastern Washington without a touchdown for the first time, Eastern Washington had gone 11 years of scoring at least one touchdown in every single game. When they hold Eastern Washington to 3 points and they win 14-3, that might not be a 42-point margin of victory like a lot of times we see in college football. Make no mistake, Weber destroyed Eastern Washington in that game, because if you could hold Eastern without a touchdown and to below 200 yards of total offense, you are playing at such a ridiculously high level. So I guess what I'm getting at is what we talked about in the first segment, and it's that Weber State oftentimes in this modern era under Jay Hill is overlooked because they're not flashy. They don't have a 3,500-yard quarterback that's going to throw 30 touchdowns. They don't have a bunch of NFL-type receivers. They beat you in the way that's probably the least appealing and or least ingratiating way that you could beat people, and that's by playing absolutely lights-out defense, controlling the clock, and never wavering on special teams. When you win games like that, it might not be the 67-7, spread offense like we used to see with Bob Stitt. I mean, think about the variance of games that Bob Stitt coached in his career at Montana. You might beat Sac State 67-7. You also might get absolutely destroyed. You also might blow leads. You might have shootouts. You have these ebbs and flows. It's certainly, no doubt, exciting in terms of the ebbs and flows of games, and it's completely and vastly different than what Weber State does. But Weber State, the formula that they have is so defined, and I think that maybe it gets overlooked broadly and around the conference. But people are starting to recognize it. I think that's why you see them as a top 3 team in these preseason polls, because people now understand that, hey, it might not be the most exciting, but guess what? It works. And it's been working for Weber State.
So what do you think is going to happen with Montana and Montana State?
I think that the Cats.
I do appreciate the 5 minutes on Weber.
I think that the Cats. I truly think that the Cats have more of the best athletes in the league than any team in the league. I really think that Bryce Stirk is a next-level athlete. I think Troy Anderson is a next-level athlete. I think Braden Conkle and Jacque Allen are next-level athletes. I think Montana State has the longest string of corners that you could roll out there. Jalen Cole's uncertain status is definitely a hit to that depth. Whether the Gibson twins can get back on track and get Tyrese and Tyree, one was suspended during spring ball, one was with the team. If the one that was suspended can get back in action, that's another body at corner too. But when you really talk about the elite athletes, and then you factor in the guys on offense, whether it's Kevin Cassis or Isaiah Infonse or Travis Johnson or the linemen. I mean, I think that both Lewis Kidd and Mitch Brott are NFL caliber guys. They'll be guys that at least get a sniff from the NFL. And when we talk about that, I think that they have more elite players than anybody in the league, and that's not to mention guys that are still mysteries, like Jason Skrempos, the gigantic defensive tackle transfer from Washington, or Armandre Williams, the new edge guy that they got from Washington, or Jahari Martin, who's a guy who could be the breakout star in the league because no one knows what to think of him, but he was the MVP of the Lakeland High School team that won the 7A state championship in Florida. He was the MVP of the best team in the state of Florida. Take that into consideration when you think about Florida high school football. He's a guy that could come in and start at Mike linebacker right away. So you talk about top-level athletes. I mean, Travis Johnson is undoubtedly one of the greatest athletes in the league. But how do they use him? Troy Anderson is undoubtedly one of the greatest athletes in the league. How do they use him? If they can put it all together, I think Montana State could be mean. And I think that the thing that they just need to do is just get out of their own way and not screw it up, and that comes down to the quarterback situation. In terms of the Grizz, I think it's so much just about embracing the style and mentality that Bobby Hauck has had so much success with over the years. If they can do that, if they can finish, I always tell you this, so much of it is revisionist history. Montana went 80-17 when Coach Hauck was here the first time, when he was in Missoula the first time. That in itself is such a dominant record. They went 31-1 against the Big Sky Conference. That in itself is such a dominant record over the last 4 years of Hauck's tenure. What people don't remember is the way that those games were won. Sure, there was the 11 turnover avalanching of Stephen F. Austin in the playoffs in 2008 or 2009, where Stephen F. Austin turned the ball over 11 times in Missoula and lost by 60. There was those every once in a while. But more often than not, it was beating teams by 7, by 10, by 14, grinding out the clock. People easily remember when the Grizz score 60. They hardly remember when, in 2009, in the midst of an undefeated season, they needed a last-second field goal at Idaho State to win 12-10. That's how you get to 80-17, though. That's how you get to 31-1. It's not the 52-10 wins. It's you go on the road and play like absolute crap at Idaho State, and you still figure out a way to win. That was where Bobby Hauck was at its best. If the Grizz can figure out a way to recapture that, then I think that the Grizz can be back to at least being in the mix amongst the competitive teams in the league.
You're right, I think, on all of those counts. But here's the thing to me. I'm going to try and make my argument for and against the Grizzlies. The argument for the Grizzlies is this. Last year, and Coach Hauck mentioned this to us. He said that he thinks Eric Tabor came up with this stat. So shout out to Tabes on this one. That last year was the youngest team in the history of Montana football in 126 years. So that's, if you go, well, if they're the youngest team ever in Montana last year and they were close to winning or whatever, they blew some games late. Maybe that was the youth coming through or whatever it is. But look at how good they were when they were good. Look at how good they were when they were at their best. that is unbelievable, and they're just going to be another year older, and they're going to have so many guys. I mean, they were starting more freshmen than seniors at one point last year. Well, guess what? Now you got all these kids with all that experience coming through. They're going to be really good. They've got it locked and loaded at the quarterback spot with a guy that they absolutely love, and I think is are obviously excited about in Dalton Sneed, and they have players defensively to go out and play really well overall, and the offensive line, well, guess what? It's going to be better than it was last year, without question. And so if that's the case, then why shouldn't this team be, in contention and maybe even favored to win the conference? And you know what? They could. Montana could absolutely be a conference champion, be a 10-win team, and be having a bye in the playoffs after a 3-year drought of even being there. But they also, even though they're going to have an improved offensive line, it's not going to be as good as any of the offensive lines of the other 4 teams that are in the top 5. I mean, it's just they're just not there. They do have really good, in fact, elite players at places. I mean, you talk about Jerry Lou McGinn, Samuel Kim. You talk about Dante Olson, maybe the emergence of Jace Lewis this year. You talk about a veteran front, anchored by Jesse Sims, and you can see, and Dalton Sneed, of course, you can see where there's great, really good to great players in some really key spots, but is the breadth there the way that it needs to be? But to me, the thing that's going to be the most telling thing is the thing that Coach Houck spoke with us about again today, and it's not really a quantifiable deal, but they gave games away. Their point differential in the fourth quarter was just atrocious last year, and they lost games late and games at home, which they've never done before. Well, it's so weird to try and address an issue that, as Bobby Houck said to us today, it's not like we didn't emphasize playing 4 quarters last year. It's not as if this was in question at any point. And so then, the thing is like, how do you do that? Jeff Choate, in his first year or two, we need to learn how to win. We need to learn how to win close games. And we saw Montana State lose a bunch of close games. Then we saw them start winning those close games. Some of that is mentality. Some of that is becoming more experienced and aging, which Montana will. And some of that is just... It's sort of something you have to do in order to generate it, right? It builds upon itself. Once you've done it, you're like, okay, now we can do it. Okay, now we can do it again. And Montana just never really had that after when it started to go south against Portland State last year. It just kept happening over and over. But I think it is an open question. Again, they're the biggest of the top 5. They're, to me, the biggest wild card in that group, and could finish anywhere in the line, and it wouldn't surprise me, because I'm not really sure what to think about them. But they're headed in the right direction. I mean, that's not in doubt. What they have now, the mentality, the type of football, all the coaches, as we've talked about before, maybe you still haven't emphasized enough, not one change on the coaching staff from last year to this year. And so they're, I think, ready to go.
So many of those guys from Montana State I just named, what do they all have in common? They're FBS Power 5 drop-downs. It's risky always, just because of the locker room and just the reasons that guys fall out of favor at other schools. I mean, taking transfers, no doubt about it, it's a risky proposition from time to time. But Montana, they brought in 4 guys that are expected to, at least a couple of them, expected to be impact players. And if they can get those guys to fit into the mix and the chemistry of the roster, as well as get production out of them, that could be a game changer for the Grizz as well. Because I think that was just one of the key factors, is just not only the lack of depth, but also just the dearth of talent. I mean, they just didn't have premier talent at certain positions. And I think that if Joe Babros or Ryder Rice or the kid from Washington State, if any of those guys can pan out, that's a huge addition for the Grizzlies. And I've always contended that Montana's had good talent, even during this 3-year down cycle where they've missed the playoffs, which 10 years ago would have seemed unfathomable that Montana would be on a 3-year streak of being outside the playoffs looking in. But I think that they do have talent. They just need to fill in the talent everywhere else.
Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television. Coulter, we talked with, everybody today. We are, by the way. in Spokane, if you're just joining us, the Big Sky Conference Media Days for football. And Jeff Choate was talking to us today, and we didn't even ask him about the quarterback spot. I wasn't going to ask him because what's there to even say? They're not even in camp. But he said, hey, look, everybody knows, and I'm as excited as anybody to see what's going to happen with our quarterback position. He goes, but remember, first of all, we're pretty good other places, I think, and we have been able to find a way to win games regardless of who the quarterback is. And that's true. So there's, your question on this is, well, can that continue? Is that something that you can continue on with and become what you want to be as a program? My answer to that question is no. No, you can't. You have got to solidify that one way or another. And as good as you can be other places, you have to have a quarterback that is – you don't have to have an elite quarterback. You have to have a good quarterback, though. You have to have a guy who you can trust to deliver the ball, to make good decisions, to not turn it over, a guy that, quote-unquote, won't lose you a game. That's what you have to be able to have, and I think there needs to be some continuity in there of how you're going to go. Could it be a two-quarterback system? Sure. I know a lot of people are down on two-quarterback systems. I kind of get that. I think it's possible to work, but it can't be a quarterback system where, we play two guys because one guy's playing poorly or a guy makes a mistake and now we're switching it out. It has to be a set. No, this is what we're going to do, and this is how and this is why. The other thing is, though, is they've been able to find a way to win regardless of who the quarterback is, and everybody laughs and chuckles about the fact that Troy Anderson was the quarterback last year. He's also a first-team all-conference football player last year at quarterback. So that's a pretty good quarterback at the end of the day. Like, if the point is, as you say, to win games, to score touchdowns, nobody was more of a sure thing than Troy Anderson taking the ball, finding daylight, and housing that thing last year. So that is you're losing that at quarterback as well. And I think a lot of people, nobody, I am not going to sit here and pretend like I think the quarterback should be Troy Anderson. He's I think a lot more valuable and better at other places on the field. But the point is like the next guy who's stepping in there, he's not rushing for 13 touchdowns from the spot, and also almost certainly will not have the it factor that Troy Anderson brings to the position as well. So finding a way to win with different quarterbacks is true, but it was also a first team all conference quarterback that you did have at the position, as it turns out last year.
The most obvious key factor in football is stability at quarterback. And we see it from the NFL all the way down through high school. If you have a quarterback, you have a chance. It's like former Montana State head coach Rob Ash used to always tell us. If you got 21 really good players and an okay quarterback, you probably have a better chance of being okay than you do of being elite. Whereas if you have an elite quarterback and 21 okay players, you could still be elite because you have an elite quarterback. The other factors that are so important in the Big Sky Conference, to me, are depth, stability, and experience on the fronts. Depth at corner, because you're going to always have higher-level receivers in this league because everything trickles downhill. You're going to have guys that are Mountain West level talents in the Big Sky Conference at receiver. So you have to have corners that can keep up. But to me, probably the second factor behind quarterback is what are your pair of safeties like? And I think that when we were talking about the team with the best returning quarterback has been atop the preseason polls for the last half a dozen years or so. I would try to pick the team that has the best pair of safeties, because if you have the best pair of safeties in this league with how diverse all the offenses are, because one week you might be playing Cal Poly, and the next week you might be playing Weber State, and the next week you might be playing Eastern Washington, and the next week you might be playing UC Davis. Those are such distinctly different game plans. To have guys that are versatile enough to be able to perform against those, that's oftentimes a formula for success. And you look at the Grizz. Bobby Houck told us. You asked him about the quarterbacks, and he said, is it an advantage to have an entrenched leader who's also a talented player at quarterback? And he said, I'd probably give you the answer that not a lot of coaches would give you. He said, I don't necessarily think that it's necessary. He said it's a bonus. If you have it, it's not necessarily necessary. And like he said, they won a lot of games without the Walter Payton award-winning quarterback during his first tenure here. So I think it can be done. And here's the other thing. Weber State has not had this headline-making quarterback, yet they've won back-to-back Big Sky Conference championships because they had exactly what you just described. A guy that's not going to lose them games. When you look at Jadrian Clark, Jaden Clark was, a big, strong kid who never really put it completely together to fulfill his potential, but he was good, and they made it to the playoffs. Look at Stephen Cantwell. Stephen Cantwell is completely non-athletically gifted. Stephen Cantwell is 5'10". He was a guy who went on a mission out of high school and then went to a junior college and then didn't think he was going to play quarterback. Doesn't return to the game, start playing Division I quarterback until he's 26 years old. Yet he was a great leader. He knew when to move the sticks, and he took care of the ball. Weber State won the conference with Stephen Cantwell as their quarterback. I have no idea what the development is going to play out like. I can't project the future. But I can tell you right now that Casey Bauman and Tucker Rovig both have a lot more natural talent than Stephen Cantwell. It's just about the mental part of the game. And if the Cats can just find a Stephen Cantwell, I think they're a Big Sky Conference Championship contender.
I mean, I think a lot of what you said is right. And you know me, I always think that the quarterbacks get overpaid. I mean, I wouldn't agree with what Rob Ash said. Like, if you got an elite quarterback and 21 okay guys, you have a better chance of being elite than if the reverse was true. No, I don't agree with that. But it's still the most important position in football, and it's not close in terms of one guy on the field. It's the quarterback, so I get that. And my thing is this: could they be good to really good without having a consistently good quarterback, or be settled at the quarterback position? They could be, because they do have talent all over the place, and they run the ball first, and they do all of that. But could they be elite? Look, they're not going to win the conference. They're not going to win the Big Sky Conference if they don't have a quarterback that's good. And if Casey Bauman or Tucker Rovig turns out to be a top 5 Big Sky Conference quarterback, they're going to win the Big Sky Conference. I mean, they're going to be certainly in that conversation, especially with the way that their schedule sets up. I mean, that's where they're at, but it's not going to happen otherwise, and that's why I say no. They're not going to be like what's elite. You make it to the postseason and then you get smacked. Is that elite? Well, no, and that's what will happen if you are unsettled or have poor play at the quarterback spot. If they have good play at the quarterback spot, they're going to be very serious. And if it turns out that all of a sudden one of these two guys has completely figured it out and just goes out there and slings it, look out. I mean, the sky's the absolute limit as far as I'm concerned.
The most interesting part is that they can, if Tucker Rovig and Casey Bauman don't work out, or they're just kind of middling along, Montana State can run a no quarterback system, and that's pretty crazy. When they run a tempo and they rotate guys at quarterback like they did during their absolute peak when Matt Miller took over at offensive coordinator last year, and they were rushing for 400 yards a game down the stretch to make it to the playoffs. Sometimes you play Kevin Cassins at quarterback. Sometimes you play Travis Johnson at quarterback. Sometimes you play Trey Anderson at quarterback. It's a different dude, and you're just lining them up in the diamond, and it looks unorthodox, and people can make fun of it all they want. But it's like Jeff Choate will tell everybody. When anybody used to criticize Chris Murray, he'd say, hey, yeah, Chris Murray might have only completed 2 passes today, but why do I care? We rushed for 440 yards. Like when they beat Portland State, it ended up being, I think, an 8-point victory in the final score, but they rushed for 458 yards. I think it was the 4th highest total in school history. It's like Choate said, why would I throw it if I don't have to? I do think it all comes down to, I think we would agree on this. Montana State needs to just find an option at quarterback that doesn't lose them games. I don't think they have to find anybody that's going to win them games. I just think they have to find somebody that's not going to lose them games, because I do think that they can come at you with such an array and variety of ways to move the football that are non-risky, because they can do it with so many different dudes in the run game, in the pass game, in the option game.
I do agree with that. And also, by the way, I think a lot of this is Jeff Choate saying, well, why would I throw the football if I don't have to? Is also he's using the situation in which he is in and the game that they've just won to make a point about the quarterback. But nobody knows that they need a quarterback more than Jeff Choate knows that he needs a quarterback. And no one is him saying, well, we've been able to win regardless of who the quarterback has been, is not him saying we're good. Like we don't need to worry about the quarterback. Believe me, nobody's more is working harder to try and get his team sorted out at that position and find a guy who's going to be serviceable or better than he is. And I think sometimes people go, well, Jeff Choate doesn't care about quarterbacks, or maybe he's not a quarterback guy or whatever. And I don't think any of that's the case. I think circumstantially it's been a very odd 3 years that he's been there, and they continue to try and get that thing sorted out. But it's not for lack of emphasis, certainly.
Not lack of emphasis. It's been such a product of a lack of stability. I mean, basically, Dakota Prukop grad transferring to Oregon was the first domino, and then all of a sudden you roll the dice, you bring in Tyler Brugman, who's been at 2 different FBS programs. And you make no mistake, Jeff Choate hired Courtney Messingham as his offensive coordinator to run a Boise State-style offense, kind of a West Coast 50-50, perfect balance, right? I mean, he wanted to run it and throw it. Just like, Montana State is trying to be Boise State. They're trying to be Boise State light, and that makes sense because that's where Jeff Choate had a lot of his best success early on in his college football career. But they had good quarterbacks. Ryan Dinwiddie, Kellen Moore, those guys were good quarterbacks at Boise State, and Jeff Choate saw those guys up close and personal. So I do think that there's an element there that maybe the offense has been different than what they had hoped it to be, but now they've been building around the athletes that they have and try to stem the gap to find a quarterback guy. And we want guys to be so good right out the gates because there has been a lot of really good guys that have been good as freshmen, as sophomores. It's easy to forget that Tucker Rovig and Casey Bauman are both young guys still. I mean, if Rovig becomes the starter and then is a 3-year starter, maybe he does evolve into the guy that you hoped he would be as a 3-star recruit coming out of Boise, Idaho. So I don't know. I think that the quarterback analysis in this league is so interesting because I always think to myself, what if the Cats just had a guy like Davis Alexander from Portland State? Pretty talented guy, but who is certainly a better pure quarterback than the guys that they've had so far under Jeff Choate. What if they had a guy like Jacob Knipp at Northern Colorado? Certainly a better, more talented quarterback than the guys they've had in their program so far, to this point. But then I also think, would they still remain Montana State's the most unorthodox team in the league, period. And I think it's such a hard game plan. You talk about how hard it is to game plan for Cal Poly. Well, try going against that offense except for out of the spread, and you add weapons like Travis Johnson to the mix, but then you have a quarterback who's not a quarterback who's coming downhill at you, 230 pounds, Troy Anderson. I mean, it's a complete anomaly what they've done on offense, and I think that there's a huge glaring deficiency there to analyze, no doubt, but there's also the element of no one else in the league is doing this, so there is no crossover. So how do you prepare for this? I just wonder if they had one of those traditional style guys who's better than the guys they have in the program right now, if they'd actually be any better, though. Conventional wisdom would say yes. I think it would be more consistent, but I don't necessarily know if it makes you as different.
Do Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are going to get out and do a quick segment on the weekend that was, because the Wimbledon final simply has to be spoken about on the men's side. 5 sets and one of the epic matches of all time. And also, Coulter hasn't even gotten a chance to talk to us about the big Westbrook-Chris Paul trade, and he's been chomping at the bit for that, so we will get to it all. Coulter, we're out of town. We know that when you're out of town, it's important, it's nice, refreshing to stay at a good hotel, place that takes care of you, place that looks out for you. The Wingate by Wyndham, it's just that sort of place.
If you're traveling anywhere for business this summer, check out the Wingate by Wyndham. Unlike a lot of hotels out there, they do not jack up their business rates during the summer. Many hotels do raise their corporate travel rates, but the Wingate by Wyndham, they keeps their business travel rates consistent year-round throughout the summer and all year long for all qualified members. Wingate by Wyndham offers great year-round rates for corporate travelers with the bonus of extra Wyndham Rewards points, and they upgrade regular business guests for no charge whenever possible. Give Kim or Alicia a call right now, 406-541-8000 today. That's 541-8000 to learn more. Let the Wingate by Wyndham in Missoula make you feel at home even when you're not.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Visit is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
At the Montana Club, our goal is to create a menu of mouth-watering food with variety to satisfy any craving. From the garden fresh ingredients in our salads to our succulent, perfectly grilled Montana Club Angus steaks, we take pride in every detail that goes into preparing your food. Top off your meal with a premium cocktail, wine, or microbrew. Come as you are and satisfy your craving with our home-style breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Take summer by storm with a new Polaris off-road vehicle. During the summer sales event, rebates go as high as $2,000 and financing is as low as 3.99%. Live your life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on our legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger or take on any task or trail in a versatile Polaris General. Whatever you're looking for, now is the time to take your pick from the off-road's best-selling lineup. See Polaris.com or your Polaris dealer for rebates up to $2,000 and financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months during the Polaris Summer Sales Event at Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. July is Kurtz Polaris' 30th birthday, and they are celebrating with unprecedented savings on select parts and accessories with the purchase of a new Polaris off-road vehicle, Beta or Husqvarna dirt bike, or any of their new line of Crest pontoon boats. Go to Kurtz Polaris for details. Offers valid in U.S. through 7/23/19 on new 2015 to 2019 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride. Hey folks, Ryan Tutel, and I'm here with Josh of the Advocates. Josh, do most injury accidents end up in court?
Luckily, most personal injury cases can be settled out of court through a fair negotiation with an insurance company. However, sometimes it is necessary. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get a fair settlement. Luckily, most personal injury cases can be settled out of court with a fair negotiation with the insurance company. However, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get the right settlement for you.
It's Josh at the Advocates, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Sports Center. The preseason polls reflect the final regular season standings when the Big Sky Conference released its preseason projections on Monday. At a Big Sky Conference kickoff in Spokane, Eastern Washington was selected by the league's coaches and affiliated media to repeat as league champs. UC Davis, an upstart who shared the league title with the Eagles and made the first FCS playoff appearance in program history last year, was picked to finish second.
Weber State picked third in each poll, while Montana came in at fourth in the coaches' poll and fifth in the media poll. Montana State picked fourth by the media and fifth by the coaches. Weber State shared the league title and made a third straight playoff appearance last season, while Montana State earned its first playoff berth since 2014.
UC Davis quarterback Jake Mayer was selected as the Big Sky preseason Offensive Player of the Year. The senior was the league's Offensive Player of the Year last fall. He threw for 3,941 yards and 34 touchdowns. Dante Olson, Montana, was the league's preseason Defensive Player of the Year. Last season, Olson was a consensus All-American after piling up a school record 151 tackles, 11 TFLs, 6 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles.
And finally, other cats on the preseason team include Troy Anderson, Mitch Brott, Bryce Stirk, Braden Conkle, and Munchie Filer. Other Grizz on the team include junior receiver Sammy Akim and junior linebacker Chase Lewis.
Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound. Tutel and Nuanez. All guests join the show on the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. Broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studio on ESPN Radio in Western Montana and across the state on SWX Television. Here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Rolling down the road to the end of a Monday edition of Tutel and Nuanez, live from Spokane, Washington. The Big Sky Conference football kickoff. Fun weekend that it's been. Great to see, talk with, eat with, chat with, watch all the coaches, players from the season that will be in Big Sky Conference football. This gets me pumped up. But first, well, not first, last after we got through all of that stuff, we got to talk about the weekend that was around the sports world at large. It is Tutel Nuanez. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Kurtz is celebrating their 30th anniversary. That's right. They've been in business 30 years. They are offering you 30% off. That's right, 30% off MSRP on select parts and accessories with the purchase of any new Polaris off-road vehicle, Beta or Husqvarna dirt bike, or any Crest pontoon boat. See dealer for details. Some restrictions apply. Kurtz Polaris in Missoula and Sealy, their 30th anniversary sale. Get in and check it out all July long. Coulter, an epic Wimbledon final. Novak Djokovic and Federer going 5 sets, like a 12-point tie break in the 5th set, and disappointing that it was that the match ended, that the title ended on a mishit after that unbelievable game that Federer just sent skyward off the side of his racket. But I'll tell you what, if you could have a more epic final between those two guys, like it matters, right, that it's Djokovic and Federer. You can throw certainly Nadal in there as the big three, but that those two guys would have that sort of performance down the stretch, really unbelievable. And I thought it was great as it ended. You know, normally when you win Wimbledon, you throw the racket, you start jumping around, doing all that kind of stuff. But part exhaustion and I think part respect and part an appreciation for the moment. Novak Djokovic just sort of stood there, wide-eyed, happy, walked up to the net. He and Federer, I think, exchanged, mutual respect between two unbelievable champions, but also you just know you've been a part of something that's spectacular. You know what I mean? In that moment. And for them to do what they did, and for, I thought, Djokovic to react sort of in that muted way, in a very pro-Federer stadium, by the way. This is, they were all about Roger Federer at Wimbledon on center court on Sunday. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great for tennis.
The first time that Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic played in a Wimbledon final, Reggie Bush and Vince Young were two of the top draft picks in the NFL. That's how long these guys have been battling. And I think that there's a certain conversation to be had about the acceleration in physical conditioning and the acceleration in just the way that athletes are able to take care of their bodies and the impact that has had on tennis, maybe more than any other sport, because of just the pounding that tennis is. Because you look at the greatest tennis players of all time, I think you could say that 3 of the 5 greatest men's tennis players of all time are playing right now. And these guys started competing against each other nearly 20 years ago. And that's a testament to the endurance and physical conditioning of Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. But you look on the women's side as well. Serena Williams is unquestionably the greatest women's tennis player of all time. And she has been, she just played in the Wimbledon final again. I think she played in the Wimbledon final for the first time almost 20 years ago. That is absolutely amazing to think about. When you look at the all-time majors, Grand Slam tennis title winners in men's tennis history, Roger Federer is number 1 with 20. Rafael Nadal is number 2 with 18. And Novak Djokovic is number 3 with 16. These guys have all been competing together since Djokovic first broke onto the scene in 2008. So you're talking about the last 12 years has been 3 guys. And I think it's both good and strange for tennis because there's been almost no new stars, right? You kind of just know, it's Wimbledon. I wonder if it'll be Federer and Djokovic, or will it be Nadal and Federer, or will it be Nadal and Djokovic? It's kind of just a combo of the 3, and there's been hardly any other new faces. Andy Murray had a little blip where he was kind of competitive in there. Andy Roddick was trying to break into the mix, but this just never could. So there's been this holy trinity of men's tennis players, and I think it's been really fascinating to watch the longevity these guys have had. The fact that Roger Federer is the oldest of these guys by several years, and that he is still good enough to advance all the way to the final of Wimbledon and play a record-setting 5-hour-plus match it's incredible in itself. And I think he deserves a lot of accolades for how amazing and peerless his career has been as well. But I just find it fascinating that we've seen the continued dominance of these pinnacle figures in the history of tennis on both the men's and women's side for such a long time.
Yeah, you're right. Presumably, or at least conventional wisdom has been that tennis has one of the shortest shelf lives for professional players because it's so hard on your knees, all the lateral movement and everything, that it's, a young kid's game, and you just fall off. And that is being proven completely false because the best players in the game continue to be and have been for years and years those four. Serena on the women's side and then the big three on the men's side. Just period, end of story. I mean, it's and they, I think the progress that's been made in things like nutrition and things like rest, have been impactful to that. But it's also just a testament to who they are and the great skill. I mean, yeah, there's I think the athleticism that we see in sports is starting to erode in terms of the importance that it plays. You, of course, have to be a phenomenal athlete, but I think that the sharpening of skills, which are not beholden as nearly as much to time, is starting to prove that it is, as big, if not a bigger factor than the rest.
But to complement and contrast that point, I think that the three greatest athletes, the three greatest pure athletes to ever play tennis, are Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic. Rafael Nadal is the most athletic person to ever play tennis. Rafael Nadal is an elite athlete. I mean, he is an unbelievably fast, strong, quick twitch. I mean, he's put together. But, I mean, Federer, his footwork is peerless. I mean, if he translated that footwork to soccer or basketball, he would be an elite basketball player too. Not to say he has the frame to necessarily play basketball, but I think that, when you're comparing and contrasting just pure athletic gifts between Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi and John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg and Rod Laver and Nadal and Federer and Djokovic, it's not close.
I don't agree with that, although Andre Agassi's hair was key. It's not what I'm saying isn't so much that the athleticism. I think the reason that we're seeing the longevity, they are unbelievable athletes. Yeah. But if you took a sampling of, say, the top 10 best athletes that are playing tennis in the world today between the ages of 22 and 27, they would probably all be in or better than those three guys in, running a 40 or how high you can jump or stop and start and that kind of stuff. And it's the skills that these guys have created that have carried them as far as they go. But it certainly is coupled with elite athleticism. Athleticism will never go away, be unimportant in sports, of course. Like, that's sort of the basis for it when you're doing these things with your body. But I think the skills, I mean, with the guy like Jokic in Denver, it starts to show you, from a basketball standpoint. Even, Arvydas Sabonis going back before that. Athleticism takes a lot of different shapes and forms, and there's a lot of ways to do it and do it well. Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Quick break. We'll be back. Coulter wants to say a word about the Chris Paul Westbrook trade. We'll do that, and we'll also tell you what's coming up this week. Got a big week planned for you next.
Alpine Touch has been providing you with the distinct seasonings you know and love for decades. Now, Alpine Touch has something to help you unleash the freshness of all the delicious flavors you need to spice up any meal. Check out Alpine Touch's new coarse grinds, unleashing the fresh taste of the garlic pepper or all-purpose seasonings to please any nose or taste bud. Coarse grinds can be purchased by the pound at retail locations around the state or at alpinetouch.com. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
When you need a bank to help ramp up your savings strategy, look to your local bank, Opportunity Bank of Montana. Build confidence in your financial future when you create a rainy day cushion or take care of the nest egg you already have. Opportunity Bank offers options from basic savings to money market accounts and certificates with competitive rates. There's nothing like the feeling of progress, so let's get started today. Come see us at Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com. Member FDIC.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here, and I'm with Josh from the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, if our listeners have been injured in an accident, how can you help?
We're here to help you after a car accident by negotiating with insurance companies, recovering lost wages if you have any, and even getting you into a rental car if you need one. Call us today for a free consultation, and we'll get started helping you right away.
If you need help, get a hold of the Advocates. Call Josh at 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve an advocate. In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters. And you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com. Hello, Missoula. Ryan Tutel here from Tutel and Nuanez. At the beginning of 2019, Coulter came up with a new idea that has already grown into one of our most broad, in-depth, and successful segments. The ESPN Roundtable has been a highlight of the year for us so far.
From the standout seniors from the University of Montana men's Big Sky Conference championship basketball team to NFL players with Montana ties, to Grizz head coach Bobby Hauck to Montana State Athletic Director Leon Costello, we've covered a wide swath with these weekly long-form interviews.
Heck, we even had a real Irishman in the studio. Standout Grizz men's tennis player Oisin Shaffrey was certainly one of our most entertaining subjects.
As we enter the summer months, we're going to keep the ESPN Roundtable rolling with a collection of premier guests.
So check out the ESPN Roundtable. The 30-minute segment airs at noon each Wednesday on Tutel and Nuanez at 5 p.m. on 102.9 ESPN Missoula and SWX Television every Thursday, and forevermore as part of the Big Sky Breakdown podcast series at SkylineSportsMT.com.
The ESPN Roundtable presented by Paradise Falls, Missoula's coolest hotspot.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
Welcome back. Been a fun show on a Monday afternoon. Tutel and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio from Spokane, Washington, the site of the Big Sky Conference football kickoff. I'm amped, Coulter. I'm ready to rock now. The football thing going on. I know that my wife's very, very happy to hear that, too. All she needs is me to watch more football. It's Tutel and Nuanez. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, and now celebrating their 30th anniversary. That's right, all July long, 30 years they've been in business, and they are giving you the presents. That's 30% off. 30% off MSRP on select parts and accessories with the purchase of any new Polaris off-road vehicle, Beta or Husqvarna dirt bike, or any Crest pontoon boat. See dealer for details. Some restrictions apply. Kurt's 30th anniversary sale in Missoula and Sealy. Go check it out. If you missed anything in the show, it's available on the podcast. Podcast available on the TuneIn Radio app, iTunes, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. The Tutel and Nuanez podcast is there. It's brought to us by the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. Coulter, we've given you a ton of time here at the end of the show to talk about the Chris Paul Westbrook trade. Is that what you want to do? You want to do that, or you want to do the promo stuff and do the other stuff later? You tell me.
We could do a more extrapolated segment on this a little later on, but I think that I think that Russell Westbrook and James Harden on the surface level has a chance to make the basketball go flat because they're going to dribble it so much without passing it. But I also think that I talk all the time about what sort of point guard do you have, what sort of ball dominant guy do you have, and Chris Paul has to have the ball in his hands to be his most effective version. He has to be able to control the game. When you play with James Harden, you can't do that. Westbrook, his tempo is almost irrelevant because his tempo is all breakneck speed, downhill. So although I hate the fit, and I don't think the Rockets will be appealing to watch at all next year, I actually think that James Harden and Russell Westbrook is a better combo than James Harden and Chris Paul. We'll talk about what's going on later on this week. We had a good day today. Obviously, ton of interviews, most pertinent to our audiences. We talked to Dalton Sneed and Dante Olson today, so we'll share that with you later on in the week. Kind of a fun interview with them. We said, hey, boys, we already been answering a bunch of other questions, so let's just talk about your summer. So that was pretty fun with those guys. We also talked to Kevin Cassis and Jackway Allen from Montana State. So we'll have that as well. And then our ESPN Roundtable this week is with Sam Herder from Hero Sports. He joined me on Tutel and Nuanez when you were out of town. And now he's back to just break down the entire Big Sky Conference. He covers the FCS on a national level. So we have some comparing and contrasting stuff with him between the Big Sky and other conferences in the country, as well as just some comparisons to NDSU. And then, of course, on Thursday, we'll be live. Katie O'Keefe's 4 to 6, Tutel and Nuanez come down. We'll be drawn for a pair of tickets to the Grizz at Oregon football game. So check that out. Come hang out with us down at Katie O'Keefe's in the Stevens Center. And we'll be doing Tutel and Nuanez live. First of 8 straight live Tutel and Nuanez.
Yeah, looking forward to that very much. Go down to Katie O'Keefe's and put your name in the box down there if you want to be entered to win those tickets to the Grizzlies-Oregon football game on September 14th. It's a great weekend. Appreciate everybody here for accommodating us, and we will be bringing you tons of sound from this event, more opinions and thoughts as we go. For Colter, Ryan here. Have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you tomorrow from Missoula, ESPN Radio.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf